In this optional segment content, we're going to look at how to effectively use Project to view and report on project status. Let's first stop to think about what needs to be accomplished when viewing and reporting project status. Once the baseline has been set and the work of the project has started, you will need to regularly collect, update, and analyze project performance details with a focus on three specific areas. How much work was actually required to complete a task? Did the task start and finish on the planned dates? What was the cost associated with completing the task? This information needs to be compared to the project baseline, and the results need to be communicated to the stakeholders. If the comparison is not favorable, you need to consider if corrective action is required. Overall, project communication is often cited as a major cause of project failure. While great flow of information is not a guarantee of success, poor communication is almost certain to create failure. When planning for the project, you should be developing the communication plan for status. Who needs to know? What do they need to know? Why do they need to know it? And what format or level of detail is required for them? Remember that variance is what we call the difference between the baseline. Variance is usually measured in terms of dollars for costs and time for schedule. So in this segment, we're going to look at a variety of techniques you can use to identify variance and report on it. Is variance ever a good thing? The short answer is yes. You have some tasks which will come in early and under budget, while other tasks may have overruns. Some projects may end with positive variance, but too much positive variance is not good either. There is an opportunity to learn and use the information to do a better job on estimating and managing future projects. Before being too concerned about a small amount of positive or negative variance on individual tasks, be sure to look at the bigger picture. Be watchful, be thoughtful, and communicate an appropriate measure and take appropriate actions. When you start thinking about how to get the message out, chances are some communication tools and techniques exist in the culture of your organization. Find out what these are and what the current recipients of this information think about them. Remember, Gantt charts are usually not appropriate for status reporting, though some managers do like to see them. But MS Project can help with features such as customizable project reports and dashboards, the ability to export to other tools for visuals such as Excel, Word, Visio, PowerPoint, copy visuals, for example the timeline, to paste as pictures in other tools, and save project data in other formats such as Excel, PDFs, and XML. Before we get started, if you are working in an environment including project server access, you want to be sure you do not publish your work in the optional content. Following the steps on this slide will make sure you are disconnected from project server while working on this content. Pause here if necessary and work on making the change before proceeding. Publishing files from this content could impact your regular projects, as we are going to change some settings. Whenever you are connected to Project Server, just avoid opening and editing the files of this content, and you will be safe. In this segment, please just use the file that you had at the end of Content B, or simply use the Content B checkpoint file. First, let's see how we can best identify tasks that have slipped. Once again, the Project Statistics function found on the File tab, Info tab, can be a good starting point to identify the big picture. First, we can see that as of this point in the time, the project will end 7 days later than originally planned. While this may not be an issue for a large multi-year project, for a small project, 7 days can be significant. We can also see that at this point we are 66% through the duration of the project with 88% of the work completed. So work is progressing faster than planned. Either the last bit of work is going to be extraordinarily hard and spread out, or there is some form of delay that is causing the plan to extend by 7 days. You may remember that we added 7 days of lead and lag time to the project, so the latter is the right conclusion. We're also looking at the fact that we may be a little over budget. The amount projected is $11,270, which is less than 10% over budget, so this may be okay as long as we don't incur excessive additional costs during these last few days of the project. Or perhaps we can save some dollars if we look closely at the remaining costs. Once we have a handle on the big picture, we're ready to dive into the details. From the Task tab, if we drop down the Gantt chart function, we can see that Tracking Gantt is one of the views. Select this to get a good visual of the tasks. The top bar indicates the baseline, red for critical, blue otherwise. Unless you changed the formatting, this is the default. The lower bar indicates the actual progress. This way you can visually see the tasks that started later or took longer than planned to complete. As we saw in the previous segment, we can filter the view to just the tasks of interest. Selecting the built-in filter, Slipping Tasks, we can isolate the view to just the tasks that are slipping and their summary tasks. Project first eliminates any completed tasks, then looks at those that have slipped from their baseline schedule. Remember, like variance, the concept of slip can be both positive and negative. If we replace the entry table with the variance table, we can get the specific amounts of variance in the schedule, both start variance and finish variance. At this point, you can apply other filters. For example, you may only want to see late tasks. One other useful view is the amount of variance in the work by resources and assignments. To see this, select Task Usage from the View tab, then select Baseline Work and Actual Work checkboxes on the Format tab in the Details group. Each task and resource has 2 rows showing the baseline and actual work. This will be an indicator of where costs may be off track, and we'll look at those next. Tasks are just one indicator of project health. Costs are another. In this section, we'll look at how to review variance of costs by task. To start, return to a regular Gantt chart view. On the View tab, select Clear Filter from the Filter drop-down in the Data group. Filter will then display No Filter. In the Data group, Tables function, select Cost to view the cost table. In this table, you can see the baseline cost, scheduled cost, actual cost, and cost variance for each task. The variance is the difference between the baseline cost and the scheduled cost. Remember that Task 0 is a summary for the entire project, which should match the values in the project statistics box. It's important to note that this is an important view because here we can see all costs: the entertainment cost resource, fixed fee server cost, and bound galley proofs material costs are all visible in this view along with the costs of human resources. Some other views might not include them. Looking at the top-level costs, the costs rolled up by summary task, you could get an idea of which parts of the project are completed and which are over budget. In this case, the public launch phase is the most notable with $800 in variance. You may recall that this was caused by the server setup fee of $500 and bound galley proofs $300 that had not been included in the original plan. We can home in on over-budget tasks by selecting the Cost Over Budget filter. That shows us the over-budget tasks. But wait, the variance for the public launch phase shows $800, but only $500 shows up under it. Remember, we always need to review the data and make sure it makes sense. We're in charge, not the software. As a starting point, we might look at the definition of the filter, since that's the main driver of this view. If we edit the Cost Over Budget filter, we can see that it consists of two tests. One is that cost is greater than the baseline cost. The other is that the baseline cost is not zero. The task that includes the bound galley proofs has no work resources, like people or equipment, associated with it. So the baseline cost was zero. That would exclude it from the filter. So is this a feature or a bug? And how do we fix it? Well, first, we might consider if all tasks have appropriate assignments before we create a baseline. But with rolling wave planning, we don't always have that up front. This might also be a task performed by someone in another department. While there is no charge to the project for that resource, the project does need to supply the materials. So our alternative is to customize the filter. We'll want to maintain the original just in case we need it as is for something else, or we discover that there was a specific reason and it was a feature. While still in edit mode, add your initials to the name. I like to do this for customizations, especially if I'm using a shared copy of project or working with a connection to project server. Makes it easier to identify the changes that I've added. We don't have the benefit of knowing why this filter was set up as it was, so we should keep the default out-of-the-box version around just in case we discover a future need. Select the second row and click Delete Row to remove the test. When we save and return to the view, we can see the excluded task is now included. The result is we can see the task that was over budget on materials. Keep in mind that if this was a larger list, we could still sort by variance to be sure to look at the over budget tasks in order of severity. By choosing the Resource Usage view, we can see the resources over their tasks. Adding baseline cost and costs allows us to see where the variance occurs. Note as you scroll down that entertainment, a cost resource, and bound galley proofs, the material resource, also show up in this unfiltered view. The fixed server fee does not, since it is not a resource or associated with the resource. So remember, the total costs from this view are only with respect to resources as they are applied to tasks. You need to be careful to look at the other views to make sure you are picking up all the variances for the project, not just for resources. Try applying the Cost Over Budget filter too. If you do so, you will find you need to create another custom filter for resources. This would work equally well with the task usage view and show the tasks over the resources in a time-phased view. You have a complete set of tools now to detect and analyze cost variances. Sometimes we need to focus on just the costs of resources. This may not always be of interest to the project manager, but executives, engagement managers, and cost accountants are among the roles that will like these views as they relate to organizational costs. These views are also important to tracking resources that bill. The resource cost information stored in project can be used to populate bills and other related documents for your organization's service to others. Viewing the cost table in the resource sheet view allows you to see the cost, baseline, actual, and remaining costs with the variance. Note this includes the cost, resource, and materials, but again, not the server setup fee, since that was entered as a one-time cost for a task. That cost will appear in task views. Sorting by largest to smallest allows you to see your most expensive and least expensive resources. The cost column is the sum of their actual cost and remaining cost. You can also sort by variance to quickly find resources with large variances. You should note that the dollar amount of variance doesn't tell the whole story. What is more useful to know is the tasks that have the highest percentage of variance. Understanding which tasks have the highest percentage of variance can help you avoid issues. In the next section of this content, we'll start to look at that method. If you want to get things back to the normal ID order, click on Sort in the Data group of the View tab and select by ID. There are many different ways to report project status in terms of budget and schedule variance, as well as other metrics. Project has a rich set of features that can provide this data. Remember, the status report is not a technical question. It's a document designed to convey the right information in the right format to the right people at the right time. In this section, we'll see how Project can create a stoplight view to support reporting on cost variance. Once you master cost variance, the same techniques can be applied to other metrics. To start building this view, start with displaying the cost table in the task sheet view. We're going to add a custom field to this table to show the stoplight view. To add the custom field, go to Format tab, Columns Group, Custom Fields. Filter the fields by number on the right-hand side and select number 3. Using the Rename button, type Overbudget in the name field. Your result should look like this screenshot. Use the selections on this slide for the radio buttons that appear below the list of fields. You are going to create a formula to decide which graphical indicator to display. Type the formula on this slide in the Formula dialog box to return a 10 if variance is within 10%, 20 if variance is within 20%, and 30 unless cost is 0, in which case 0 is returned. Note the definition of IIF on this slide and that fields enclosed in brackets are project fields. Adding a custom field of this type is very much like typing a formula in an Excel cell and then copying that formula to all the cells below. Now assign appropriate stoplight graphics for these 3 values. Within 10% is green, over 20% is red, and between 10 and 20% are neutral or caution, yellow. The first and third columns are drop-downs, and you will type the value in the middle column. Using the Add Column to the far right, add the Overbudget custom field to the cost table, and you'll find it populates the stoplight images. As you continue to track progress and update values, the Overbudget column is recalculated. Close and save your file if you want to review these in the future. Thank you for viewing the optional content on viewing and reporting project status. This video is independent of the other content. Save your file if you want to review the changes in the future, however, it will not be used in future video content.